In the early hours of February 28th, explosions shook the outskirts of several Iranian districts, striking within miles of the offices of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Almost immediately, Israel declared a state of emergency, working in tandem with the United States to prepare for an inevitable Iranian retaliation. The objective behind this military escalation is twofold: to force a regime change in Tehran and to permanently dismantle the nation's nuclear infrastructure. The logic driving the US and Israel is based on the concept of a preemptive strike, the belief that direct military action is the only way to neutralize these threats before Iran can cross the nuclear threshold. However, when we weigh the constraints of geography and physics against the track record of past interventions, the logic of a strike breaks down. The evidence suggests that a military solution is unlikely to achieve its stated goals. Treating this standoff as a standard regional conflict overlooks a much larger problem. This is a massive strategic trap, one that could trigger a sequence of unintended consequences far beyond the borders of Iran. The current crisis is a reversal of the 2015 JCPOA agreement. Under that deal, international inspectors verified that Iran capped its uranium enrichment at 3.67%, a level sufficient for civilian energy, but far below what is needed for a weapon. That stability abruptly ended in 2018 when the US withdrew from the agreement. Under a policy of maximum pressure, Washington reinstated crippling economic sanctions, attempting to force Iran back to the negotiating table through economic isolation. While leadership in the United States eventually changed, these severe sanctions remained. With no economic incentive to comply, the diplomatic path effectively reached a dead end. This chart shows how Iran responded to that isolation. After years of flatlining at the 3.67% limit, Iran accelerated its enrichment levels, rocketing up to 60% as a means of establishing regional deterrence. To put that in perspective, 60% enrichment is far closer to the 90% threshold required for a nuclear weapon than it is to the civilian levels Iran maintained just a few years ago. This collapse of diplomatic leverage has created a stalemate, leaving countries like the US and Israel to view military force as the only remaining tool to address the Iranian stockpile. But the military options are strictly limited. A full-scale invasion is politically non-viable for the US, as the high risk of casualties and prolonged occupation would face immediate, overwhelming domestic opposition. That leaves aerial bombardment as the primary alternative. But history suggests airstrikes alone rarely force the democratic transition the US hopes for. Look closely at Iraq. While a massive bombing campaign removed Saddam Hussein from power, it did not lead to stability. Instead, it triggered a deep insurgency and a sectarian war that lasted for over a decade. Similar patterns emerged in Syria and Afghanistan. In every case, external military intervention led to a power vacuum, allowing radical groups like the Taliban to re-emerge or even strengthen their positions. There is also a physical reality to contend with. Iran has dispersed its nuclear facilities and buried many of them meters underground. Standard aerial attacks are often physically incapable of reaching and destroying the infrastructure located in these hardened bunkers. Finally, there is the psychological effect. An external attack very often provides a hardline regime with a unifying enemy, allowing them to consolidate nationalist support and crack down on moderate voices within their own society. The result is a paradox. Aerial strikes may fail to destroy the deepest bunkers, but they are very likely to unite the population and push the regime to accelerate the very nuclear program the strikes were meant to stop. The consequences of such a strike wouldn't be contained to the region. We have to look at the vulnerability of the geography immediately surrounding the conflict, the Strait of Hormuz. This map shows the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow passage that serves as the most critical shipping route for the global trade of fossil fuels. The global reliance on this corridor is staggering. India, for example, relies on the strait for as much as 40%. That spike in energy costs would lead to a surge in transportation and manufacturing expenses, creating a wave of imported inflation for countries all over the world. To fight that inflation, central banks would be forced to raise interest rates, putting a significant strain on global economic growth and increasing the risk of a widespread downturn. Ultimately, this sequence of events, from blocked shipping to rising costs and falling growth, risks triggering a global economic contraction. Instead of stabilizing the region, a strike could leave the world economy vulnerable, while giving Iran a powerful incentive to finish its work on a nuclear weapon.